Other than that conversation, do you have conversations with other people around that topic about whether anyone had suggested that anyone else destroy documents?
I don't recall conversations.
Okay. I just want to see if we can narrow the time frame a little bit here. I understand you came back on June 18. Do you have any recollection of about how long after this conversation you just told us about took place?
No, I don't.
And you've worked there since 1999, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall any other time in all of your years there where there had been a report of someone suggesting that an employee destroy documents?
I can't recall someone saying destroy documents. Certainly there are times where we would need to make sure that we're tracking the right versions, or during an RFP process, you collect documents.
Was it fairly clear by the time you got back that, well, let's strike that. Let me ask it a different way, excuse me. Did you become aware at some point that an original scoring document had Bangor in first place in their particular region, and that eventually Bangor was, excuse me, let me start that again. Did you become aware that in an original scoring document, Bangor was in second place in their region, and eventually that Bangor became the awardee as number one? Did you become aware of that at some point?
There were, over time, there were several different versions of documents, and so I can't recall any specific documents as far as how the scores played out.
Well, without regard to specific documents, did you ever learn that Bangor had in second place under an original scoring system but had moved to number one in its district after the scoring system was changed? Did you ever become aware of that?
I don't recall it.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's the questions I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator King. Representative Kruger, Representative Davis, do you have any questions at this time?
I'm all set.
Representative Davis?
No.
Thank you. I'll ask a few questions myself then. Ms. Wiegand, thank you so much. Just one moment. I will remind those observing that we did allow for questions from staff to come through the chairs and the leads. I'm getting some of those right now. I'm going to just set them aside for a second because I actually had a couple questions of my own before I'll let others take a look at those. I want to talk a little bit more about RFP type process, and I understand one was not used in this, and I understand the time constraints, and sitting on the Appropriations Committee myself, I can appreciate the time crunch and the moving amounts of money that kept changing, I think, over the course of the budget process, and how that would be frustrating. My question is, you, in your role being there since 1999, you've been involved in RFP processes before, I assume, on other types of contracts?
Yes.
Great. And thank you. And when in this particular, and you also stated you're familiar, and you said in the past you've had experience with keeping different documents or tracking different versions. You said that a few minutes ago. Different versions of papers during an RFP process, scoring formulas.
Yes.
Yes. And in this case, where DAFS had advised initially that just to lower the amount of districts was not required, did not require an RFP process, and then since then, here in our public comment and in the report, it states that DAFS purchasing said that if they were going to do this much restructuring, they certainly would have advised an RFP process, timeline notwithstanding. My question is, who is responsible for tracking the different versions of the sheets along the way in this case? Senator Cates outlined the various different changes in weighting or scoring or outcomes. Who was responsible for tracking those particular documents during this discussion?
I would say we probably didn't have a specific, I don't recall a specific conversation where someone was told that they were tracking.
So as far as you know, there wasn't one person who was assigned to that task?
Andy Finch, as the person who oversees the Healthy Maine Partnership, would have been the person who was sort of most responsible for the operational pieces, but I don't recall a specific conversation about what should or shouldn't be tracked or kept.
Great, thank you. I want, in the binder in front of you are the documents that we have, the black binder. I want to just touch on a few of those, and I think there are some additional questions as well. I want to first ask you about document B, which is the summary of the criteria and data points that were planned and used for scoring of the HMPs. And you can see there are two columns there. One was the original criteria and data points that appeared to have been agreed upon based on the investigation by OPEGA at the end of April. And then later you see the actual criteria in the second column and data points that were used. The difference, you can see there's a big difference in those two columns with 1, 2, 3, 4 that overlap, and then 4 that didn't ultimately get used and 2 that were added. What is your recollection, and what can you tell us about the decision to go from one list to the next?
I've never seen this document, so it's a little challenging to see it for the first time. So I'm not sure whether...
Well, then we can take a step back from the document, then. I appreciate that. So then the question would be, what role did you have, and what are your recollections of that discussion around changing criteria? Because clearly the core group, you were part of it, except for when you were away, about what criteria would be used. And we also know from the report that, in fact, there had been a discussion even prior to the budget about possibly making changes in the HMPs. So from a criteria and evaluation standpoint, I guess what is your understanding of why certain pieces of information were used or not used during that process?
The analysis of what might make sense to use, I'd say probably most of that was done by Andy Finch with assistance from, say, someone who could help with fiscal, etc. So I think there was a sense of, here's some ideas about what we could use, and then there was what's practical within the time frame and might be the strongest, etc. So there were decisions made about what might make sense to use and what might not.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you to take another look at, in the binder, the items labeled D1, D2, and D3. And these are these are the versions of the scoring matrix with the cover sheet descriptions, D1, D2, and D3. Are you familiar with these documents? You can see each of the descriptions of them. Do they look like what you would have been using?
They do look similar. I can't, at this point, 2 years later, it's challenging to say what they are or aren't. But yes, they look like what we might have used.
And based on, and you can take a minute to look at them, it's no problem, the different descriptions that are contained in the summary sheet that differ, do you have any particular recollection at what point in the process or at what meetings some of these documents might have been used or relied upon or changed?
No, I can't. It would be just a guess on my part.
Okay, well then let's keep going in the binder there and let's look at E. Let's look at an E. This is an email from Andy Finch to Sharon Leahy Lind and copied to you. Subject is Sharon Andy Rationale XLSX, so I assume that's a spreadsheet. It says PennQuest remains an issue as the data from the mean of the DL scores does not support the ratings that we gave them for infrastructure. As I remember the conversation, we discussed how close all three were in most aspects. Given that we felt that Piscataquis was more difficult to engage on a positive basis than the other two, though this was a matter of degree and not a judgment that they were difficult. Assigned to A, which I presume is Andy. Can you, this email obviously was sent to you, and can you explain the context of this email and the reason that there was a comparison after the fact of the FPDI ratings to the scores in that subset survey for the district liaisons?
I was CC'd on this email, and when I was asked to produce documents that related to scoring criteria, this appeared to me that it might potentially be one of those, so I produced it to OPEGA. I didn't write the email, though, so I really can't comment on what the email's about. I don't know.
Can you share receiving this email? Clearly you got the email because you were a part of the group and involved with the scoring. So I appreciate that you didn't write it, but you did receive it. And so why was it sent to you in this case?
I don't know, except that I was Andy's supervisor. He wrote the email, and he perhaps wanted to keep me in the loop. But it wasn't as though we had a conversation about it, or so it wouldn't have had much meaning to me, except that when I looked for documents that related to scoring, this one appeared to fit that, and so therefore I shared it.
I think you did the right thing to share it. It absolutely relates. So when the email, well, it does not, it's clearly sent to Sharon and to you. It uses the words we in here, so it does not support the ratings that we gave them for infrastructure. Were you a part of those ratings?
I wasn't actually the part of any ratings. I was the part of reviewing ideas around criteria, etc. But the rating, no, I wouldn't have done that.
So you did assist in the development of the criteria overall, but not in the ratings?
Yes, no.
Okay.
The ratings were handled by Andy Finch and Sharon Leahy Lind.
But you did help with the development of the criteria?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to go back to document B in the binder, which is the criteria, the summary of the criteria we talked about a few minutes ago. Since you were involved with the criteria, and can you talk with us about why the top four related to the KIT quarterly work plan, the fiscal reports being up to date, the senior management team review, and the ratio of quarter 1 and 2 milestones were not included in the actual criteria that were ultimately used?
I probably need to go back to what I think was my original statement. When we brainstormed criteria, which I was a part of, then people went back and looked to understand what it might take to produce this information and how reliable or strong it was. And so we relied upon that analysis to move forward. I wasn't a part of that analysis. It was only learning what might make sense that the final criteria were decided and moved forward.
So then in that case, on the final criteria side, the two that were added related to support and promotion of developing infrastructure, and then the average completion of tobacco and physical activity and nutrition milestones. Can you explain why those were added then?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Representative Kruger, did you have questions?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for helping us through this. I'm curious, going back to when you were a supervisor to Mr. Finch, I'm correct?
Yes.
When you were told by Mr. Finch that he was asked or ordered to shred documents, what you said earlier indicated that it kind of went came and went pretty fast. But I'm wondering if this was, is this a usual event? Was it something that you would shrug off, or was it something that I'm interested in your reaction and your looking back. I mean, I know 20/20 hindsight and all that, but if you could somehow reconstruct or help us understand your reaction to that request, I would appreciate that.
Okay. So when Mr. Finch told me that he was asked to destroy documents, he didn't use the word shred. Shred appeared, I believe, in the media probably. But destroying documents, I guess in my mind, I saw that as a version control issue. That when you have, as you pointed out, here's 3 different spreadsheets that all look, or maybe there's 4, all look pretty similar. And when you're when you have multiple people working together, and you're trying to, respond to requests, etc., when you have so many different versions, it can be challenging. So I took it to mean, I mean that's the spirit in which I saw it as. To have multiple documents gets very challenging with lots of people. It just gets crazy. So that's the spirit with which I took it. I didn't, in my mind, I didn't even consider anything about if there was an attempt for concealment or anything like that. That never occurred to me. That wasn't something that would have been part of what I would expect from us and what we do.
Thank you. And also, did we understand you correctly to say that you were not aware of criteria or weighting that process?
If that's what I said, I probably didn't mean it quite that way. Over several different meetings of reviewing how it was going, what was happening, etc., I saw information, and at some point, obviously, there was a decision to make weighting. I don't recall that. I cannot remember anything about how the final decisions got made for which criteria were in and which were out, and what got weighted and what didn't. I don't remember anything about that. I could or couldn't have been there. I don't know. It didn't. It's not something that I'm remembering.
But your word was weighting? Am I right?
I believe that's what Senator Cates used, weighting.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, that's not an uncommon part of this process when you're doing that, am I right?
To weight things differently?
Correct.
No, that wouldn't necessarily be an unusual thing at all.
And finally, I have another question from a committee member. You said, and this is a quote, "We all have our own compass. Do what you think is right." This was an instruction to Mr. Finch.
I'm sorry, I must have confused the committee by adding my own statements. No, I did not say that day. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have said anything about a compass. So I would not have said that.
Okay, so in other words, and this is a question from a committee member, is that there isn't a department compass.
A what?
A department compass.
Oh, no. I probably got too philosophical there, and that confused the...
That's just fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White.
Thank you. Representative Davis.
Thank you. In your meeting with Andy Finch, he told you that he had been asked to destroy documents. Is that what you said?
Yes. I guess I didn't characterize it as a meeting. I stopped by his desk. We had a conversation because I initiated it. And after that conversation, he said, "I need to tell you something." So he was informing me of something. And after he informed me, I left. So we did have a dialogue, but I guess to me it wasn't really a meeting because we didn't have a formal conversation.
He said that to you because you were his supervisor.
Yes, I would assume so.
He wanted you to know what he had been asked.
Yes.
Were you ever asked to destroy documents?
No, I don't recall being asked to destroy any documents, no.
And did you ever tell anyone to destroy documents?
No.
Thank you.
Senator Cates.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions my colleagues have asked me to ask. First of all, Ms. Wiegand, are you aware of any precedent for the situation where CDC was asked to diminish previously approved funding for Healthy Maine partnerships before this occasion?
Can you say that again?
Sure.
To do what with funding?
Well, you were having to deal with the fact that funding was being reduced for the Healthy Maine partnerships in early 2012, and the question is, was that a new thing? Had you had to deal with defunding of parts of that program before that time?
No, we hadn't.
Okay.
So that was new.
All right. And have you seen other situations where documents which were used in a process for determining grant awards, where those documents were discarded or destroyed after the process?
That's a challenging question because you're talking about grant awards, and as we know, in grant awards we usually do an RFP process which has a specific set of rules as to how you keep documents or don't keep documents. In this case, we were doing what we thought made sense, and there were no specific guidance. There was no specific guidance about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few more questions. The